Let's talk about the events of my second Justice Society movie in my DC cinematic universe. This movie is set in the 70s, and it all starts off in Central City, where we get a team-up of Jay Garrick and Alan Scott, saving the day, stopping some bank robbers. But as they are stopping this crime, a tornado kicks up. Suddenly, an android with a T on its chest and a billowing blue cape flies out of the tornado and attacks and defeats Flash and Green Lantern. And it announces to the world that it is Red Tornado, and that in less than 2 weeks, it would bring about the end of the world. The Justice Society is assembled. They try to hunt down this Red Tornado, but as they're going after it, more androids appear. An android calling itself Red Torpedo floods the city of Los Angeles. An android calling itself Red Volcano triggers an eruption of Mount Rainier near Seattle. And an android calling itself Red Inferno sets Yellowstone National Park ablaze. More and more sightings of these androids are popping up all over the globe. And after each devastating attack, they all make the same statement: that an apocalypse is coming, and each time they tick down how much time left the world has. The Justice Society split up into different teams, hunting down each individual robot, and eventually the team consisting of Martian Manhunter and Hawkman are able to take down the android known as Red Tornado. They bring the android back to their government contacts, and their government contacts connect them to a man, the United States' leading expert in robotics, Dr. Will Magnus. Will performs essentially a robotic autopsy on this android, and it confirms his worst fears. That red android was made by his mentor, Dr. T.O. Morrow. Dr. T.O. Morrow appeared in my first Justice Society movie. He was a minor side villain, and he was the one who designed all of the robots that the Justice Society fought during the course of that movie. He was a Nazi scientist, and after the events of the war, he was brought over to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip. Eventually, after enough time designing robots for the United States, they gave him an apprentice, someone they trusted, Dr. Will Magnus. Will and Morrow got along famously, and they designed a lot of really, really cool robots, eventually culminating in Will's magnum opus, his Metal Men. But alas, the Metal Men were never meant to be. When Will proposed the plans to the United States government, the government shut him down. With how much more globally influential the Justice Society was becoming, they just really decided robots weren't the course of the future. Superheroes were. And Will informs the Justice Society that that notion drove T.O. Morrow insane. The fact that his life's work was going to be outdone by biology infuriated the man. And after that, several years ago, T.O. Morrow just vanished. Will never went looking for him because he was kind of a crazy old Nazi man, so why would he go looking for him? And the government never went looking for him because he was a retired old man that they brought over with Operation Paperclip, and they just fired him. They didn't give a shit. They just sort of let him go. And apparently building the red androids is what he was doing in his spare time ever since. Will teams up with the Justice Society and helps them track down the androids across the globe. We get more cool globe-trotting adventures, more fights with androids. Eventually the reveal that there are even more red androids out there. It's still just the 4: Tornado, Torpedo, Inferno, and Volcano, but there's like dozens of each of them. And eventually, the Justice Society managed to track down Dr. T.O. Morrow. They have one big final battle with a shit ton of robots, and the Justice Society is completely overwhelmed. They are getting ruined by the red androids. These androids are too powerful. It's almost like they were exactly designed to combat the specific weaknesses of the Justice Society of America. But as everything is going bad, the President of the United States calls Will Magnus and tells him to activate his Metal Men. And they fly into action alongside the Justice Society, and effortlessly, like embarrassingly effortlessly, the Metal Men demolish all of the red androids. Finally, the Metal Men and the Justice Society of America stop T.O. Morrow, arrest him, and bring him to jail. The Justice Society are thanked for their service, but Will Magnus is framed as the actual real hero of this entire endeavor, and his Metal Men are ordered by the president to begin mass production. And over the next couple months, something isn't sitting right with John Jones, Martian Manhunter. You see, Martian Manhunter couldn't read Will Magnus's mind. Will revealed that that's because of a specific type of microchip inhibitor that he and T.O. Morrow had invented. They installed it into their brains because in a world where there is a guy who can actually read minds, having a thing installed in your brain when you're making government super weapons that doesn't allow people to read your mind is probably a good idea. So whenever John tried to read Will Magnus's mind, he'd just get a random radio station. And the same thing was true with Dr. T.O. Morrow, but something just felt off. John went to the prison where T.O. Morrow was and talked to him at length. But the more questions John asked, the more erratic T.O. Morrow became. Eventually, John asked him so many questions that T.O. Morrow froze up and stopped, and his speech started to glitch. T.O. Morrow was an android. John then flies back to Magnus Laboratories and presents this evidence to Will. He suspects that T.O. Morrow is still out there and they simply caught a duplicate, a dummy that T.O. Morrow had specifically built and designed to take his place in case the JSA found him. But as John is explaining his theory to Will and looking around Will's new, fully funded laboratory where dozens and dozens of metal men are in various stages of production, that is when it hits John. T.O. Morrow is an android duplicate, but T.O. Morrow wasn't the one that built it. Will Magnus was. And just as John realizes that, Mercury of the Metal Men wraps around John and sets himself on fire, trapping the Martian. When John asks him why he would do this, Will says to protect humanity. His Metal Men could replace soldiers in the battlefield, and Americans wouldn't have to lose their lives fighting pointless wars anymore. His Metal Men could replace workers in all factories, and America could live a life where no one had to work, and all of their force was done by automated servitude. He and T.O. Morrow pitched that idea to the government years ago, and the government shut them down for being too hippy-dippy. And then Will Magnus was the one who decided, what if they made an evil android? An evil one made by someone else that attacked the world, that could one-up the Justice Society, that could show that robots were truly the future. And his mentor T.O. Morrow, the former Nazi scientist, turned him down because Will sounded like a lunatic. You see, T.O. Morrow was a Nazi scientist, not by choice. T.O. Morrow was from Poland. They kidnapped him and forced him to make robots for him. When he came over to America, it was like a fresh start. He felt safe from the dangers that the Nazi Party constantly posed to him because finally he was working for a government that wouldn't murder him if he didn't want to make death robots. And that didn't sit right with Will Magnus. Because Will was a visionary. He could see where the future was headed. If the government, if the world focused on superhumans instead of robotics, that would eventually lead to eugenics wars, to children with superpowers being trafficked around the globe. The global arms race would become a human trafficking and eugenics nightmare. He could see a utopia. It was within his grasp. And if he just had to kill a couple thousand people to save the millions or billions of lives that his robots could over the years, then that was fine by him. And now he just felt sorry because he always liked Martian Manhunter, and now he was going to have to kill him. Will Magnus tells him it was foolish of him to come alone. And Martian Manhunter responds, yes, it would have been. And boom! boom, the Justice Society bursts in through the fucking walls, and that's where we get our big final fight. The JSA work together, they beat all the Metal Men, and Will Magnus is arrested, and he is thrown in prison, raving that he is right, and they will all see. That is the movie that kicks off the second phase of my DC cinematic universe, and everything he said is exactly what they have to deal with. Everything this dude said came to fruition. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a villain is make them correct.